Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gather around because it's story time. I want to tell you the story of a UFC GOAT that couldn't even be convinced to fight the interim champion for $30 million. $30 million to fight the interim champion, the guy that you claim you're better than. And it wasn't enough. Imagine being that scared of a fighter. You're claiming you're the GOAT, right? Just imagine with me for a second. You're claiming you're the GOAT. You're 37 years old. You're not even that old for the sport. The guy that you are too scared to fight is 32. So it's only a 5-year difference. And you are refusing to fight him for $30 million. Can you imagine? Obviously, Jon Jones has much more money than me. But I would let any UFC fighter have their way with me for $30 million. That would change my life forever. And for anyone doubting that the UFC would pony up $30 million, well, you have to think of it like this. So for UFC 285, when Jon Jones made his long-awaited return against Cyril Gane, Ali Abdelaziz, which I don't understand how this guy is even allowed to represent every single major mixed martial arts in the UFC. Like, this is insane. I don't trust the guy at all, but that's a whole nother thing. He claims that about 1 million pay-per-views were sold. So if the pay-per-views were being sold for roughly $80 per pay-per-view, that's $80 million roughly that the UFC made. Not to mention the $12.5 million that they made on the gate in the stadium. So you're looking at $92.5 million, and that's not even accounting for merch sales or other deals. So, I mean, we're looking at the UFC making well over $100 million for UFC 285. And that was not, besides for Jones, his return and his debut at heavyweight, it was not going to be as massive of a fight as Jones versus Aspinall, especially after all of this stuff with him ducking, the ducking chronicles, and Aspinall, all the talk about Aspinall's the best, but Jones is the GOAT, and all this stuff. There's no doubt in my mind that the fight between them two is going to make a lot more money than that fight. So $30 million to not only put on one of the biggest fights they could, they would make, this is just a spitball, but just off of pay-per-views and the gate, I mean, $150 million. So really shave off the $30 million, then that's $120 million. I think they would invest $30 million to make that much money and also push the sport's reach even further, because just like every big fight does, it attracts more and more UFC fans. More and more people get interested because their buddies are talking about it or their family members are talking about it. So make no mistake, the UFC was going to pay that $30 million, okay? But this guy was so scared to tarnish his legacy. And the irony is that he tarnished his legacy in the process. Fans will never forget the story of Jon Jones, the duck. The waddling, swimming, aquatic duck, the bird that loves the lake, the duck, Jon Jones. And I was a Jon Jones fan, okay? Growing up, he's one of the fighters that really got me invested in the UFC. What he achieved, being the youngest champion of all time, is nothing short of incredible. The guy was a pioneer in the sport. Now, when the time came for a 38-year-old Daniel Cormier to fight a much bigger, much younger 30-year-old Jon Jones, he said, let's do it. Let's do it. Keep in mind, Jon Jones was most likely at that time on performance-enhancing drugs. That's just speculative, but he did get caught for it shortly after. So you can only infer, right? 8-year difference in Daniel Cormier, like an absolute boss, said, let's do it. Now, a 5-year gap, Jones being 37, Aspinall being 32, is too big of a gap for Johnny Jones to accept the fight for $30 million. Now, the UFC, Dana White specifically, came out and refuted, because Joe Rogan on a podcast made this claim that he had intel that the UFC was going to pony up and pay the $30 million that Jones was asking for.
The rumor is that he wants $30 million, and that the UFC's going to pay it.
And Dana White, of course, came out and denied it. But duh, of course he's going to deny it. He doesn't want any other champions getting any ideas thinking they can hold out to try to get more money. If any of them even sniffed that the UFC was willing to pay $30 million for a championship bout, come on. They would never disclose that. I have zero doubts in my mind that they were, in fact, willing to pay it, and even talked to Jones about it, which is why Dana, on record at a presser, said the fight is done. I have zero doubts in my mind that the fight's going to happen.
John agreed to fight Tom, yes.
So he hasn't signed a contract, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I mean, you guys have heard me for the last however long. I said, I guarantee you this fight's going to happen. This fight's going to happen. Fight's going to happen. You guys told me the crazy shit that was going on Instagram and all these other places. But yes, I've been saying John is going to fight Tom.
And lo and behold, it never materializes. And that's because $30 million wasn't enough to convince John Jones to overcome his fears of Tom Aspinall. Can you imagine? That's how intimidating Tom Aspinall is. That's how frightening Tom Aspinall is. That he makes the GOAT of the sport. And I say GOAT in quotations because there's a lot of asterisks next to a lot of chapters of John Jones's career. The PEDs, of course, that's a huge stain on your career, on your legacy. Not to mention his outside the octagon antics, which, granted, shouldn't really affect your view of the fighter himself as a fighter and his greatness. But I personally believe that a fighter or player in any sport, their greatness is obviously mostly attributed to their performances in their sport, but also to how they represent the sport and the role model that they are. See, when you are a talented athlete and you are making lots of money doing a sport, you're accepting a role as a role model for children. And if you can't live up to that, I think, in my opinion, that tarnishes your GOATness, your greatness. But I don't want to get carried away about the outside of the octagon antics. But that is something to consider. Also, we are talking about a guy that admitted to cheating. He admitted that he eye pokes his opponents.
Cormier is saying before the fight that I'll end up poking him in the eyes at some point. And the reason why he says that is because I do poke people in the eyes. And it's very illegal, but I do it.
And that is a blatant foul. That is a blatant and intentional cheat. And not only that, it's just so disrespectful, and it's really goes against everything that mixed martial arts stand for. Mixed martial arts are all about respect. The origin of martial arts in Asian culture is rooted in respect for your sensei, respect for your body and the body of your opponent, and only using it in self-defense instances. So to try to permanently damage your opponent's vision, and obviously he wasn't trying to permanently damage it, but he's trying to damage it in the moment, which could lead to permanent damage. I mean, Michael Bisping lost an eye. So this is real stuff that can happen inside the octagon. And when you're purposely doing this type of stuff to your opponent, that's not greatness. Man has consistently had issues with doping agencies, or anti-doping agencies, I should say. John Jones wishes they were pro-doping, but he hid under the octagon in his gym to avoid a USADA agent that was there to test him. He hid under it for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours just to avoid being tested. Now, why would you ever do that? Because you're going to get caught doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Then he had that thing recently where they came to his house. The woman claimed that he got violent towards her. And the man has a history of being violent towards women, which is just, again, I don't want to get too far into this stuff, but this is all stuff to consider, all right? And that's not to mention that Anthony Smith could have said, I can't continue. He took an illegal knee from John Jones. John Jones gave him that illegal knee. Anthony Smith like a fool. I respect it, but I also find it pathetic that he didn't just say, I can't continue. He'll be the champion. He'll get the royalties from the next fight for the pay-per-view buys. And then he can possibly try to win the next one. But let's face it, he probably would have lost the next one. But at least he would have been champion. His name would have been etched in history. But he went out on his shield, and I respect that. But John Jones possibly could have lost that fight. He couldn't finish Anthony Smith either, which is when the writing was really on the wall that this guy, yeah, maybe he's not taking the sport serious enough. But isn't that an indictment on his goatness as well? Then he fights Thiago Santos, who tore every ligament in his leg. And Jones still couldn't finish him. In fact, it went to a split decision. So one judge actually felt like Thiago Santos deserved to be victorious in that fight. Then the infamous Dominic Reyes fight, where pretty much everyone with eyeballs and a brain who understands the sport of mixed martial arts scored it in favor of Dominic Reyes. That is pretty much a completely agreed upon consensus in the mixed martial arts community, okay? So that's 3 fights in a row at light heavyweight that are really, really questionable from him. Then he takes years off, 2 to 3 years, to try to bulk up. He comes in looking sloppy as hell. I mean, the dude has a gut. The dude looks sloppy. And Cyril Gane, all of a sudden, forgets that he's an elite heavyweight fighter and just rolls over and lets John Jones submit him. All right, there's question marks all around that fight. Like, I wonder if the UFC paid Cyril Gane to just let John Jones beat him. I mean, these are things that obviously we can never prove, but I mean, God, the guy couldn't have tried less hard. That fight was pathetic from Cyril Gane. He must have got paid really, really handsomely, but obviously you can't prove that. It's just a speculative theory. Then we go about another year or two. I forget the exact time frame in between, where he doesn't fight anyone except he fights Stipe Miocic. In the meantime, Tom Aspinall, the most light on his feet, the guy with the shortest octagon time in UFC history, his fights never, ever, ever go past like 2 minutes. He's never even seen the second round in his career. This guy is the scariest fighter on planet Earth. He becomes the interim champion, and the interim champion is only established when the undisputed champion cannot fight for medical reasons. John Jones was healthy when he fought Stipe Miocic. He insisted that Stipe Miocic, and the UFC insisted it too, and just like they always do, they think the fans are too stupid to realize that they're being duped. That was not the fight to make. That fight was pathetic. Stipe Miocic is a legend, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, possibly the greatest heavyweight of all time. But he was almost 43 years old at that point. He had gotten knocked out so badly by Francis Ngannou in his last outing. Hadn't fought in a long time. I mean, this was not the best heavyweight in the world to fight John Jones. Tom Aspinall was, and every fan with a brain and eyeballs knew that. But John Jones wouldn't fight him. So fine, we have to wait for him to fight Stipe Miocic, wait for that fight to happen. Then eventually he's going to fight Tom Aspinall because he has no choice, right? He's 37 years old, got plenty of tread on the tires because pretty much for the last 7 years of his career, he hasn't really fought much. And when he does fight, he's fighting guys that aren't quite the pedigree of the Rampage Jacksons or the Lyoto Machidas, these guys that he built a name off of fighting. So this brings us all to things that just transpired, where he retires out of nowhere, unceremoniously, at a UFC Baku. Now, 99.9% of humans on Earth, if they had a gun to their head and said, if you don't tell me what country Baku is in, you're going to die. Pretty much everyone with a gun to their head is getting killed, because up until a couple days ago, I did not know Baku was a place, and I did not know that it was the capital of Azerbaijan. Now, John Jones, the GOAT, his retirement gets announced as an afterthought by a completely just worn down Dana White. I mean, this guy, between him thinking power slap's a good idea and him just trying to get involved with boxing, the dude needs to stop. But anyway, it gets announced as an afterthought by Dana White because it got asked by one of the reporters that barely could speak English, but I respect them even trying. So our GOAT unlike the GOAT of any other sport, went out with a whimper, not a roar. And not only that, he deprived Tom Aspinall the right, the privilege that Tom Aspinall has worked for and achieved and deserved to be crowned the undisputed champion in the octagon in front of an arena of roaring fans, screaming fans, in front of the world, televised, a moment encapsulated in time on camera. And John Jones deprived Tom Aspinall of that. And it's pretty much the most embarrassing saga in mixed martial arts history. I think everyone will remember this as John Jones ducking and $30 million not even being enough to overcome your fear and your pride and your ego and just fight the guy that deserves it. Because at the end of the day, this is sport, right? This is fighting. And the best fights the best. And if you don't think that the other guy is the best, you fight him and you prove that he is not and you are. And that did not happen here because John Jones knows that he is not the best heavyweight on planet Earth. And that's all I got for you guys. You may disagree. There's a lot of people that, no matter what, will dick ride John Jones, and that's fine. He's given me a lot of good memories in the past, but it's been a long time. Okay? I'm 31 now. The last time I remember really having fun watching a John Jones fight, I had fun watching the Dominic Reyes fight, but that was a long time ago. 6 years ago. So, yeah. That's all I got for you guys. Subscribe to my channel. I promise to keep pumping out great content for you guys. I promise you will not regret subscribing to my channel. Leave me a comment. I want to hear from you guys. I love talking MMA, so I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think. And stay tuned. Tay out.